Hello, welcome in. Thank you for joining me. Hi there. Hello, welcome. All right. Oh, all right. All right, we may give people just another minute or so to go and trickle in. But in the meantime, welcome all. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Gene. It is my absolute pleasure to take you guys through some of the ins and outs of our brand new recording studios. I myself am what we call an audio engineer, and I am very excited to kind of share what I'm passionate about, which is music and podcasting and audio, with you guys tonight. Yeah. All right, so we've got a couple more wandering in, so we're going to give it just a minute, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right. Looks like we have one or two more joining us. I'm just going to get this all set up well. All right. Don't think I see anybody heading towards the door, so I'm going to go ahead and close it, and we can get started. All right, so, well, once again, everybody, thank you so much for joining me this evening. If you missed it before, my name is Gene. I've been here with the library for about the better part of this year, and one of my main projects when I arrived was to go ahead and pick out some gear and pick out some programs that we would use in the new recording studios that we were adding. I was very thrilled to get this assignment. As I did mention earlier, I am an audio engineer. A little bit about myself before we start delving into the studio. I graduated from college back in 2021 with a degree in music business with special emphasis in music technology and studio recording. And then from there, I went on to a program at a place called Dark Horse Institute, where I received a certificate in audio engineering. That certificate led me to get my first internship at Dark Horse Recording. And then from there, I got my first job in the industry as an assistant studio manager there. So I've really seen a lot of the ins and outs of studios. I've worked on a lot of different projects. I've seen bands as big as, 20-piece bluegrass bands come in and perform for us, as well as, simple things like just two-person podcasts, two people sitting in a room with microphones just talking to each other. So I just have a lot of experience kind of on all sides of audio, and it is why it is my absolute privilege to get to introduce to you Bloomington Public Library's 2 brand new recording studios. So let's start off with this question: what is a recording studio? What I have up here is a room that is specifically designed for capturing and saving audio on a recorded medium. And the audio is recorded through the equipment that is available that can range from, setups like we have where we have 2 microphones all going at the same time, and then you have, gear that is being sent to kind of level out the sound and make it sound really good. But beyond that, studios, formerly we recorded to everything to magnetic tape. You can think about cassette tapes and VHSs and things like that, but nowadays we record to programs on the computer that we call digital audio workspaces, or DAWs. And that is a word that you'll probably hear often during this presentation. And finally, the studios are run by audio engineers who capture the best sounding audio by having a full understanding of the source that they are recording, the gear that they are using, and the space that they are in. So a big part of that is what we would call signal flow. It is a concept in the studio of how our audio gets from being sound to signal. And that is the first blank on your worksheets. If you're paying attention, you don't have to worry. There's not going to be a test at the end. But if you'd like to follow along, you can fill out these blanks as I go through these next couple of slides here. So signal flow is, typically in a studio will go from the source, which is what is being recorded. So that can be an instrument, that can be your voice, that can be a car horn if you are what we call a Foley artist, capturing sound for movies and film. Then so we set up a microphone in front of our source, and it captures our sound and it sends it to what is called the interface input. Now this box that I have right before me, this is our interface. As we'll describe later on, it is what connects our 2 halves of our studio, from this very analog side to our digital side, and then it gets sent through a couple of different things. There's what we call a preamplifier in this. It is a device that turns up this microphone signal and allows us to be able to hear what is being recorded. And then that is sent, that analog electrical signal is sent to a digital converter, where the electrical waves that are being generated by this microphone are being turned into a digital binary code. So next, that moves on to what we just talked about, that digital audio workspace, and that is where we save it, and we can capture it, and we can edit it, we can mix it, we can do a lot of things with it, as we'll see here in a bit. On the flip side of that, it is helpful to know where the audio is coming from on the back end of things. So it starts at our digital audio workspace as our recorded medium. That digital code is then sent to the interface output channel. And then from there, it is sent to what we call an analog converter, which converts it back into an electrical signal, which is then sent along wires to our headphone and speaker amplifiers. That ends up in our ears. It ends up in our headphones and our speakers, and then into our ears. So question I get is, why do I need to know this? I'm just trying to record something simply. I'm just trying to get a very quick voice line for a project, or I just want to, record some vocals for a song that I'm just going to send off to somebody later and have them, kind of deal with all the technical things. But I think it's very important for anybody who wants to work with audio, who wants to work with podcasting or music, or what we call audio dialogue replacement for film, or being a Foley artist. It is important to know these things, because everything that we are using affects our sound in some way. What I've always heard is that no 2 pieces of audio equipment are made equally, of course, unless they're completely identical. But that basically meaning each different microphone that exists, each different type of interface that exists, each program that we use is going to affect our audio in a very specific way based off of the way that it was designed. And so that is what I'd like to kind of break down for us right now is the different parts of our studio and how they are affecting our audio so that when you guys go into the studio later, you have a fuller picture of what is going on and how to use this equipment, how to get it going. So let's go ahead and break down the BPL studio, and hopefully from this you will be able to glean a little bit about what studios as a whole do and what and how we can operate in future studios. You know, maybe you want to take your projects from our studio here and maybe go hire out one of the nice local studios in town and have them record for you. So here's our signal flow in our in our recording studios here at BPL. So we have our source, which is you recording. So right now I would be the source. And then this is going into this microphone right here. This is called the Rode PodMic. And then it is going through our interface that we mentioned earlier, this M-Audio M-Track Duo. It is a 2-channel interface, meaning we can hook up 2 microphones here at the same time. And then finally, it is hitting our program that we will cover in great detail here in a minute, Waveform 13. And on the flip side of things, it's pretty much that in backwards with an added step in there. It goes from waveform and it goes back into our interface here, and from there it gets sent to our headphone amp and then sent to our headphones, these Behringer HPM 1000s. So without further ado, let's go ahead and break down what the PodMic is and what it does. So the Rode PodMic I chose very specifically for our studios because our original goal was that we wanted to create a place where people would mostly focus on, recording voiceover or podcasts or things like that. But just because it is designed for that doesn't mean that's the only thing you can record with it. But as you can see, it is a dynamic broadcast microphone is its official description. So we're going to break down some of those big words here. Dynamic is what type of microphone there are. There are 3 different types of microphones: dynamic, condenser, and ribbon. The other 2, since we don't have them, we're going to kind of gloss over. But a dynamic mic works by wrapping a coil of wire around a magnet and then attaching that coil to a diaphragm that vibrates whenever you speak into it. So as I'm speaking into this mic, it is picking up all of these it has a very sensitive diaphragm in it, and it's picking up all of these tiny little movements in the air that my voice is making, and it's able to move that coil of wire around inside of that magnetic field being generated by the magnets. And what that does is it creates an electrical charge. If you can remember back to physics class, you might remember that whenever you move a piece of metal around in any sort of magnetic field, it will generate a charge. So there is a charge being built up here, and the crazy thing about it is that this charge is moving at the same frequency that my voice is because of this component in here, because of that diaphragm. So that is just always good to know. And then next, it is a broadcast microphone is specifically designed to record conversational voices and as well in a variety of different situations. It is a low sensitivity mic, which in our case can actually be a very good thing, as sometimes the recording studios may have a fan going, there may be somebody walking by next door, outside, there may be a conversation happening at those little tables that are right outside. And the nice thing about the PodMic having a low sensitivity means that all of that extra noise that the microphone may be picking up is getting cut out by that low sensitivity. Beyond that, it has what we call a pop filter, because if you heard that word pop, there's a little p sound in it. And that p sound can oftentimes generate a big airwave that we call a plosive, and that kind of smacks the diaphragm of the microphone, and it creates a very large spike in audio that is not very pleasing to listen to. So that is why I picked this one, is because we don't need to add anything to this. I'm sure you guys have seen, pictures of your favorite recording artist in the studio, and they have that mesh filter in front of the microphone. That is what is built into this microphone. And then beyond that, it also has a windscreen. Windscreen is what really reduces some of those lower rumbling sounds like that AC unit, those people walking by or talking outside, and it allows us to have a much clearer image, a much clearer capture of just our voice and the way our voice sounds. Moving on from that, we can talk about our M-Track audio, our audio M-Track duo, if I can get that right. Now, there are lots of components to the M-Track duo here. Some of its features is that it has 2 input channels. As we can see here, we have input 1 and input 2 here, and then I've got these 2 microphone cables already plugged in here. That is because, and I just realized I need to transition that. That is because that way we can record up to 2 people at a time. We can record 2 different sources and put them on different tracks, and we can save them at the same time. This is really helpful for things like podcasting, where you may be interviewing somebody, or as well as if you're a singer-songwriter, you can set one microphone up high to capture your voice, and you can also set another microphone down low to capture your guitar or your bass or your mandolin or your dulcimer, whatever you play. And since these are the same microphone, they have what we would call the same frequency response. They have the same reaction to sound, so you kind of know what you're getting whenever you use it. Next, we have an analog to digital converter. This is that digital converter we covered in that first little part when we were talking about signal flow. This takes the electrical signal that is coming from our microphone and it changes it into a binary code that the computer can read, and then it can get saved by our program. So we move on from that. It also has it has these 2 little switches here on the front. These are what we call mic and line switches. If we would want to use a microphone, we would just leave it on that microphone line, but let's say that we are an electric guitar player or electric bass player or even an electric dulcimer player. I have seen that before. We can go ahead and flip that switch to the instrument line, and it amplifies the sound, or actually unamplifies the sound, so that we don't get blown away by the very loud instrument that we can plug in. And then you can just take an instrument cable, remove the microphone, and plug that instrument cable directly into the interface, and then you can play through this device. Using the knobs on the top, just like we would a microphone, you could just turn up that volume, and you'll be able to hear your instruments in our digital audio workspace. Next here we have another switch. It's called the output switch. Now, this is not something that we typically use for recording, but if you're having trouble in the studio, let's say you're not hearing anything in your headphones, or you're looking at your waveform meters and nothing's happening, and you're kind of confused, you can take that output switch and you can flip it from the USB to direct, and you can hear exactly what is coming out of this device. Again, that is really good if you know you're having a little bit of trouble in the studio. Maybe you're not hearing something. You can flip that, speak into the microphone, or what I like to do is I like to just sit there and give it a little scratch just to create some sound, just to create anything that the interface can hear, and then you'll be able to hear what it's hearing. Next up, we have a switch on here called phantom power. Now, this is an extra 48 volts of electricity that the interface can generate that is sent to the microphone to power it. However, our microphones are very simple. They just get plugged in and they immediately work. If we were using one of those other types of microphones that I mentioned, that condenser, or maybe an active ribbon microphone, we may need to use that, but for the time being right now, we can just leave that off and go ahead and move on. So next up, we are going to check out our program, Waveform 13. And I found that the best way to do this is not with slides. It's just to go ahead and show you guys exactly what I would do when I'm in the studio and show you how you can get things set up, show you guys how to make what we call tracks and how we would record some audio. So the first thing that we are going to need is actually not even on the computer, it's this right here, a flash drive. You always want to make sure that you have a flash drive with you whenever you come into the studio, and go ahead and plug it in before you get started so that you can ensure that you're not losing any of the files that you're trying to record and that you are going to walk away with everything that you've worked on that day. So I'm going to go ahead and plug mine in here. And then I'm going to go ahead and look at some of the features that Waveform has for us on this welcome screen. So whenever you pull up Waveform, this is it right here down at the bottom, that white W with the purple. You will be taken here to this welcome screen, and there's a lot of actually really great tools on here. You can see some of the project templates that we can work with here on Waveform. So if you're a singer-songwriter, a podcaster, let's say you make digital music, you make EDM music, you can use this program. They have a preset for that. If you are, a church and you're trying to capture lots of people all at once, they have that option as well. Band recording, and then if you're a DJ, there's also a 2-channel mixer option that allows you to mix 2 songs together and transition between them. But for our and then next, what I'd like to point out is this news feed and training videos. Waveform is a program how to do some more complicated things like that. And so if we look at these training videos over here, we can see getting a quick start guide for Waveform. There are some audio recording with Waveform right here, talking about some of what we'll see later, plugins with Waveform, as well as just a lot of other resources for us to go ahead and use. So I highly encourage you that while you're in the studio, you go ahead and check this out if you have any questions. And if there's something that this can't answer, I'm usually around to go ahead and help you. So moving on from that, we have a couple of other things down here. If you want to change it to a different color, you can. We have light mode and dark mode. And then finally down here, we have our audio settings so that you guys don't have to do any extra legwork. I have gone ahead and optimized all of these settings so that we are getting the best audio that we can at the best rates that we can with no delay in between, which is what we would call latency. All right. So moving on from that, yes.
Is that similar to Audacity? Are you familiar with
Yes, I am very familiar with Audacity, and that's a great question. Yes, it is actually very similar, and especially as we'll see here in a second once we get into the project window. A lot of these digital audio workspaces have very similar features all across them. A recording, obviously a recording feature, and then they will come with a lot of different tools that you can use to mix and edit your audio later on. So we're going to go ahead and look at this. Yes.
The adjustments so you have the best audio.
Yes.
On that mic in the room.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mix things though.
No, it does not mix things. I will say we can talk. We're going to talk about that here in a second. But usually when we're mixing, we're going to be changing the volume levels in the program with some of these plugins that I'm about to show you. So.
Mics are leveled good, so that's
Yes, exactly. I will say so. There's not going to be any, any funky sounding audio. You will get very crisp recordings every single time. So yeah, let's go ahead. Great questions. Let's go ahead and move on to this new project button down here at the bottom. I'm gonna get rid of this on my screen real quick. And once we click that, we have our new project window. Our first step, yes.
a new project. So every time you're focusing this new project once you saved it. But if he comes with his
Mhm.
Audacity, that's still a new project.
Yes, I was to say, because they are since they came from 2 different programs, they would be 2 different projects.
And you always start with new project.
Yes, I would say but to answer a little bit of that, if you do come in, you were working on something earlier and you saved it to your flash drive, and you'd like to continue working on it in waveform, you can look at this browse all projects right next to it, and then it will bring up all of the projects that have been worked on or that are available to you. And if you don't, so like right here, I've been working on some loops as well as my own podcast. And then if you don't see the project that you're looking for, you can select this open project, navigate to your personal USB drive, and then you can open it up from there as well. But yes, it's okay.
So I got there, how do you get back? That's when you,
Mhm.
when I finished the project, I was right on that page. So
Yeah.
you're about to go back to the first page we saw, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. So we went there. All we have to do is just go ahead and look up at this top right corner here, and we'll see that, or top left corner usually, and we'll see that welcome tab, and we can just go ahead and select that, and it'll take us back here. And then likewise, we can select that project tab, and it'll take us back to the new projects. Yeah.
Okay, and you can also select that to go back to the screen where you're recording with the track.
Yes, exactly. And that'll show up here in just a second. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and hit new project down here. And from here, we can go, we want to pick out a unique name for our project, one that we can identify later. So what I usually do is I put my own name first, and then I put my project name. So we're going to do RS Basics. And then I put the date just to remember, just kind of have a record for myself when I was working on this, and it just kind of helps us find it later on. So we are 9:25 here, and we can go ahead and look at this next section called location. Now, this is one of the most important sections of this presentation. I know it can be kind of a meme sometimes when tech people talk about creative programs like this, but yes, I'm about to talk about file saving and making sure that we save our projects correctly, because Waveform does this thing where not everything will save under just the file that we can access our project from, but it will instead organize all of our audio into folders called recorded, exported, imported, whatever we've done with it. It will save it in those folders in our project file or project folder, just so that the file size doesn't get too big and things don't get unmanageable, and you have just a little bit of extra control over your files later on. So to make sure that I'm saving to the correct place, I'm going to look at this little blue button right next to the location tab right here, and I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now I'm going to scroll down here to my USB drive and go ahead and click on that. And then as you can see, I've already got this folder right here called Waveform Projects, just so I can organize all of the different things that I do. And we can go ahead and hit Select Folder. Now, as we can see, the location there has changed from being on our main hard drive to now this D drive, this auxiliary drive that we have in there, and it's saving to that Waveform Projects folder. We can read that right there. Next off, yes.
You put like a, when you put that name in,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything that you can put in that it will keep the project from lighting up so you can save it? Like, certain things won't take numbers or asterisks or.
Yeah.
Thing that will keep it from lighting up.
So, yeah, sometimes if you put like a dash in your file name or something like that, usually dashes are the ones that this program doesn't like. So usually like what I did up there, I just did 9:25 instead of 9-25. It also does not like those backslashes. It thinks that you're trying to add something else to that file, and it will kind of confuse the computer. So usually if you stick to just those underscores and periods, it should work pretty well. Yeah. So let's go ahead and look at this template section. This is kind of what we were talking about there with these project templates up here. These are all the same. Whenever we are creating our project, depending on what our studio goals are, we can go ahead and select a template that best suits our needs. So the singer-songwriter one will go ahead and create 2 tracks for you, one for you to record your voice on, one for you to record your instruments on, and then it will also add a few plug-in effects to each track that are already set to some pretty optimal levels so that you don't have to worry about that while you're recording. Likewise, with the podcast, it will add 4 tracks. It will add 2 for a host and her interviewee, and then 1 for a background music, and then another one for any special audio effects that you want to put in there. And then these other ones I haven't used as much, but I do know the EDM goes ahead and sets you up with some virtual instruments that we are about to take a look at as well. And then the band recording adds a whole bunch of tracks, a whole bunch of plugins to kind of help you control your sound. And then, like I mentioned before, this 2-channel mixer is for DJs. It just goes ahead and sets up 2 different tracks for us that we can kind of mix between to change different from song to song. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead and select this default template so that I can show you guys how to set up some of the things that it's going to set up for you with those templates. And then finally, whenever we're creating a new project, we just want to look at this open default edit and remove clips. These should usually be already checked by default, but just in case they are not, you can go ahead and check those and make sure that you are getting the right things that you want there. So once you've done all that, you've gone through the whole process, you've made sure that you're saving your files in the right place, we can go ahead and hit this create project. And we are now in our project window. This is what we would call our audio session. And this is where we are going to do all of our recording, all of our mixing, and all of our editing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this big old menu over here. This is just a big list of different audio effects, different preloaded audio things that it comes with. And we can just go ahead and find this very, very, very small X in the very top left corner of that and go ahead and get rid of it. Like my audio engineering instructor used to say, you want as much real estate on the screen as you can get for your middle section here, your timeline. So you just want to, if you have anything that's taking up space like that that you just don't super need, you can go ahead and get rid of that. If you do want to check that out, you can just scroll your cursor right over to the left-hand side there, and you can go ahead and check out everything that Waveform has to offer. But in the meantime, we are going to go ahead and take a look at this top section here. This is our time bar. This tells us how long we have been recording. So next, what we would do is we would just go ahead and give that a right click, and then we can change this on this time base option right here from being in bars to seconds. So if we want to record some music, it's probably best to leave that in bars, as that's going to tell you how many measures, how many musical bars that you've been that you've been recording for. But we can go ahead and change that to seconds there, so that we can see how long we've been recording in seconds and minutes. All right, up next, we want to make sure that we can go ahead and look at this first track down here. Now, the cool thing about Waveform is that its signal flow here goes from left to right. So we start over there at the left-hand side with our input section, and then we end over here on the far right side with our output section. So we can go ahead and take a first look at this input. We can see that we have a track name. This is track 1, and then it tells us right here what input we are on. So we can see that we are on input 1, meaning that whatever microphone is plugged into input 1 on this, it will appear as input 1 on our program. So from there, we can go ahead, if we needed to change which input that we needed, we can click on that once and it'll highlight it, and then we can click on it again and it'll drop down this menu. As you can see here, we have a couple of different options. The main ones that we're going to be using here in the recording studio are obviously input 1 and 2, but then also this all MIDI ins. That word MIDI is actually an acronym. It stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And I don't have that written on the paper because nobody ever calls it that. We all just call it MIDI, and we all know that it's referring to these virtual instruments that we can download and play with on our in our program here. So if we wanted to use a virtual instrument, we would go ahead and select that all MIDI ins as our input. But let's say we're recording a podcast still, so we just want to leave that on input 1, and then let's say we have a guest with us. We can go ahead and hit this little tiny plus sign right here and add a second track. Or if we have, lots of different things that we need to do, we can add up to 14 tracks at a time. But we are just going to go ahead and add 1 here. And as you can see, it just grayed out the input section on that first track and set our second track to input 2, or input 1. This is a nice feature that Waveform has that allows us to make sure that our audio is never going to do what we would call feedback, which is that loud ringing sound that you hear in movies and things like that when a person speaks into a microphone too loud and it gets all caught up in the audio system and just keeps getting amplified. So no matter what I do, I cannot set 2 different tracks to the same input. So if I wanted to do that, I would go ahead and select this down here and then go ahead and hit input 2. And now we have 2 different tracks that we can record on. But if I were to go ahead and hit this record button, we would see our white line here. This is called our playhead. It would go ahead and start moving across the screen, but as you can see, nothing is changing, nothing's happening. And if I stop it and go back and try to play, still nothing happens. That's because we haven't enabled these tracks yet. This is a very important step here. These record enable buttons act as kind of a safety. So let's say that you're trying to listen back to something that you've already recorded and you go down here to press the play button, but then accidentally your thumb slips and you accidentally hit the record button and now you're recording over something that you already recorded. And to avoid losing anything that we've already recorded, we can turn this record enable button on and off to arm or disarm our tracks and enable them to be to have the recordings on them. So if I've highlighted them red like this by simply just clicking on it, and I go ahead and hit that record button one more time, we can now see that there's 2 red lines forming behind our playhead with some squiggly lines in between. That is what we would call our recorded clips. And then this is what we can use to go ahead and edit and mix our audio. So let's say we have some silence at the beginning or end of our recording that we don't want. We can simply highlight the section that we want to get rid of and then just hit the backspace button and it'll go ahead and get rid of it for us. And to undo that, you can just go ahead and hit Command Z, or there are also a couple of, there are a couple of undo buttons down here in the top and the bottom left corner here. I apologize to the YouTube viewers as they probably won't be able to see that, but that is what is down there. But let's say that we've gone ahead and record enabled. The next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that our volume is getting up to a good level. So right now our volume is hitting about that halfway mark on the input track right there. We can all see that green line that's bouncing up and down whenever I speak. That is our volume meter for the input. And then likewise, we have this other meter on the other side. That is our output meter. So anything coming into Waveform is going to show up on that left side. Anything coming out of is going to be here on the right. So if we watch this, as I just said, is kind of hitting that like halfway mark there. That is about an ideal place for your audio to reach while you are recording. Now, the M-Track Duo is a really great interface. It has what we call crystal preamps in it, but unfortunately, not unfortunately yet, but fortunately, that means that it has a very clear sound. It is what we would call very glassy, but as kind of what is true about all audio equipment, there's kind of a trade-off to some of these things. So we may have a nice, very clear, very low noise sounding preamp. However, it's not the loudest preamp in the world. So you do have to kind of turn it up to a higher volume to get that good recording signal that's hitting about that halfway mark. Right now, I have this set a little bit between 9 and 10, and that is usually what I have found is the best and most ideal place to go ahead and start recording. So once we've gotten that set, we've gotten our record enable turned on, we've gotten our volume up to a good level there, we can go ahead and take a look at our right side of the screen here, where we have our output section. And starting from the very far right, we can see that there's this little speaker icon. This is our main output selector. So like we selected the inputs for our microphones over here, we can also change where the sound is going out of waveform. Only though we, as you can see, only have about 3 options here. We have our default outputs, our default audio output, default MIDI output, and then output 1 and 2. Unlike the all MIDI ins on that side, what we always want to do over here is just go ahead and select output 1 and 2. That means that all of our audio is being sent here to the M-Track Duo, and that we are going to be able to hear it later on, and we are going to be able to monitor as we are recording. We're going to be able to listen back to ourselves as we are getting our recordings. So it's just good. Usually this default audio output will be 1 and 2, but just so that you have the utmost certainty that you are sending your audio to the right place, go ahead and change it to that output 1 and 2 manually. The next set of features we have here is this mute and solo button. So the mute does pretty much exactly what you would think it does. It goes ahead and mutes the track. So if you hit mute while you were recording on accident, don't worry, because it doesn't stop any audio from passing through. It just stops you from being able to hear it. So this can be kind of helpful sometimes, you know, if you are recording and maybe you don't want to hear your voice, but you don't want to be constantly taking off and on headphones, you can just go ahead and hit that mute button while you're recording. Go ahead and record, stop, rewind a little bit to the beginning by just clicking anywhere on the timeline there, and then you can unmute and play it back, and you will have your recorded audio clip that you can hear. Likewise, there is the solo button, which does the exact opposite. It makes it to where you can only hear that specific track. This is something that's a little bit more useful if you're doing a mix, if you are trying to listen for something specific in one of these specific tracks, you can go ahead and hit that solo button so that you're not having to sit around and hit mute, 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 mute on every single track. All right, moving on from that. Like I kind of mentioned before, we have this output volume meter. This tells us at the end of our signal flow here in waveform how much volume we are using. And this can be very important because sitting right next to it is our volume plugin. This is how we would change the individual track volume of each track. So if I go ahead and click on this, it pulls up our decibel meter right here, and we can go ahead and adjust this all the way down. And as you can see, that green line at the end is becoming a lot lower, but the green line over there on the left side is staying the same. That's because we are only affecting what is coming out of the track, not what is coming into the track. So we can go ahead and put that back up so that I can show you this concept that we call clipping. So as you can see, the volume just shot up really, really high, and it kind of turned yellow there at the top. That means that your signal, your sound is getting far too loud, and it's at risk of doing what we would call clipping. This is when our sound overloads waveforms, audio, processors, and it starts to sound distorted and weird and bad. So we always want to make sure that we aren't going to clip our audio by just making sure that we, first of all, go ahead and set our volume right on the M-Track Duo, but then what I always like to do is, just so I have absolute certainty that nothing's gonna happen, I go ahead and just take this down about to this -3 mark right there, just to have a little extra certainty that nothing, let's say you're doing a podcast and, you tell a joke and it's really good joke and your interviewee starts laughing really hard, and then all of a sudden your audio starts getting really loud and it starts overloading. You just have a little bit of extra certainty that you're not going to clip, it's not going to distort, and because you have already gone ahead and lowered the volume just a little bit to ensure that you aren't going to overload any of waveform's processes. Up next after that, there's this very, very thin line just above our, just above this volume plugin right there. We can grab that, and this is what we would call our pan tool. Now, if you've ever been listening to a song and somebody tries to get you on your headphones and somebody tries to get your attention, and you take a headphone out, and then all of a sudden the guitar solo is gone, the backup singer is gone, maybe one of the drums is gone. That is because whoever was mixing that track took the audio and they either moved it to the left or the right side of their screen, which then in turn changed which speaker it's going to come out of. This is how we build what we would call a stereo image. Now, stereo is a word that some Beatles fans may be very familiar with, as before the later 60s, we could only record one channel at a time. We didn't have two different speakers that we could send things to. We didn't have the technology to be able to do that. But once the technology came out, everybody wanted to do it. So they went back and they remixed a bunch of Beatles tracks to have everything on one side or everything on the other side. So that's why if you listen on Spotify sometimes, you may notice that, like, hey, all of Ringo Starr's drums are all on my left headphone here. Well, that's just because whenever they were mixing it, they took that pan control, moved it all the way over to the left, and instead of trying to do things individually, they only had one drum track that they could do that with, so that just had to be all the drums all at once on one side of our stereo image there. So moving on from that, we have this little plus sign down here that allows us to add more plugins to our chain here. Basically what these do, we can go ahead and look at waveform, and these are all of the stock, all of the preloaded plugins that it comes with. And we have three different types. We have effects, instruments, and utility. Now, we're gonna focus on these effects and instruments here. For the audio effects, if we drop that down, we have a lot of really big words that we may not be familiar with, like equalizer and compressor and phaser and things like this. But all that these do is just change a certain aspect of our sound, of our audio, that allows us to mix and level out our sound here in our program. So the first one we can take a look at is what is called this 8-band equalizer. So if I blow this up for us, if it'll let me here, there we go. We can see that we have on the bottom here, we have 100 hertz, 11 K hertz, and then we have 1,000 hertz and then 10K hertz there at the bottom, and then we have 3 decibels, negative 12 decibels, going up and down that way. That is because this plugin allows us to affect and turn up and down specific frequencies in our audio. So as, again, kind of thinking back to our, freshman year physics class, all sound is made up of waves, and waves all have a certain type of frequency. But not only a certain type of frequency, waves are made up of lots of different types of frequencies, all working together all at the same time. Now, this is a very good thing, but it can also be kind of an unfortunate thing. As we mentioned before, there may be something that we call rumble in our audio. Maybe we have an air conditioning unit going on in the building, and it's causing some kind of low rumbling sounds in the very bottom of our frequency spectrum right here. What we can do to get rid of that is we can grab one of these points and we can bring our line down, and as you can see as I'm talking, it's kind of getting rid of all of those waves that were present there beneath 100 hertz. And if I bring it back up, they all start to kind of reappear. Likewise, we can grab any of these bands here and we can bring it down and change how our audio sounds on a frequency level. So this is a plugin I highly recommend that everybody plays around with and figures out, and just kind of take things, boost it up really, really high, see how that sounds. Take it down really, really, really low, see how that sounds. Just, play around with the knobs, play around with the controls on this, and kind of familiarize yourself with what these do. The next one I'd like to point out, yes?
That last one, that's probably for people who like real musicians and understand classical fusion. You want a different type of effect with live.
It can, yeah. I would say, honestly, this is probably a plugin that most people are going to put on their music or their podcast or something. It's just kind of an extra bit of control, kind of what we were talking about with like the adjusting the volume and things like that. It just allows us a little bit of extra control over the way our audio sounds and makes sure that nothing is going to stand out too much. It's not going to be, yes, so that's what I'm about to talk about. There's a different type of program called a compressor that I can show you. And what a compressor does is I like to describe it as a little guy who's in waveform. And what this little guy is doing, he's got his headphones on and he's constantly listening to our audio. And as our audio starts to hit a certain volume threshold, as you can see, that's one of our controls there, he goes, oh, we got to turn that down. And as soon as it hits that threshold, he turns it down, he waits a little bit for the volume to kind of come back up a little bit, and then he gradually releases that back to where it was. And that is what a compressor does. It analyzes your audio as it's being recorded, as it's being played back, and it can adjust the volume for you so that you don't have to sit there and make sure that everything is always even, by holding down our volume plugin right here and trying to manage to, keep things even that way. We have a little guy in here that keeps it even and keeps it level for us. So there's a couple of different types of controls that we have with this one. Like I mentioned before, that threshold, you can see it changed to decibels when I went over that. That is how loud the sound has to be so that the little guy can go ahead and know to turn it down. So once it hits that threshold, our little guy turns it down, and then he turns it down on either based off of our ratio that we set. So we can see that says 2 to 1 right now. So for every 1 decibel that sound will go over the threshold, he will turn it down 2 decibels. So it'll go down twice as much as it came up. And just like that, we can go ahead and adjust this all the way up to something really crazy. I think that says 100 to 1. So if we want something to be really quiet, we can do that. But typically what you'll need for that is probably just like that 2 to 1 or maybe a 3 to 1 ratio. You really don't need a whole lot on that ratio side. So that is per track. You'd have to, put this plugin on each track as you are doing your mix or doing your recording to ensure, and then you would want to adjust each different track's plugins to the best settings for that track. And the way that you can do that is with these. You just got to listen to it. You got to make sure that, okay, this part sounds really loud. Let's maybe turn up that ratio a little bit more. Let's get that a little bit more even. Or let's say, oh, this sounds like it's just being crushed. It sounds like it's being, really compressed. Let's maybe turn my threshold down so that my volume doesn't get too squished by my little guy trying to overcompensate. But next up, we have these settings, this attack and release. This is how fast our little guy is turning our volume down, and then how fast he is putting it back at the level that we got it from originally. So you set that. If you have something that maybe hits very frequently and it needs to be turned down very quickly, like a drum kit, or a drum, or let's say even voices sometimes, since we're talking pretty fast, you may want to have a pretty fast attack on there so that your little guy can go ahead and turn that volume down as quickly as possible. And then our release is, again, how quickly he's able to turn it back up and get it back up to that level that it was before once the volume goes back below the threshold. We can set that, and that will tell our guy exactly how long he needs to wait before he can put it back up at the original volume. And then finally, we have two more settings here. We have what is called knee. I'm not sure why it's called knee. It's just what they called it when they invented this type of piece of equipment. But basically what it adjusts is how smoothly our little guy does his volume adjustments. Does he snap everything up and down very quickly, or does he kind of ease into it a little bit? Does he kind of adjust things a little bit slowly, a little bit more smoothly? And then finally, we have this output gain. This is our output volume for anything coming out of this compressor. So as we were talking about, our little guy is making sure that our volume is getting turned down at certain points. And that may affect the overall audio that we've already recorded, and it may make it a little bit quieter. So if we need to, we can just go ahead and give that a little bit of extra volume, turn up that sound just a little bit more, just to make sure that everything is coming in well and clear. So that is what a compressor can do. And then the last piece of audio equipment that I would like to go ahead and show you. Oh, and just by the way, little tidbit, if you don't want to have a plugin on your track, you can either click on it and just hit delete plugin, or you can click on it and just hit the backspace button, and that'll go ahead and get rid of it as well. There is no limit to how many plugins that you can put on a single track, but it is kind of limited by how much processing power it's taking the computer to run all of those different programs at once. So it is good to put a good variety of plugins on your tracks and go ahead and mess around with them, play with them, see how they sound. But at the same time, you do want to make sure that you're not putting too many on there so we don't stress out our computer and cause our programs to crash.
And again,
Mhm. Yes.
you just can't go to the master and just do everything.
Yes, that is actually a great question. Up here, you can see this other track called master. This is our master output track. This is where all of the audio from all of the different tracks that we have recorded is being funneled before it gets sent to our interface here and then back to our ears. And what I always like to tell people to do with this is just leave it alone. Whenever you adjust something on here, you are not just adjusting one thing. You are adjusting everything across the entirety of your project. And like we talked about earlier, different things are going to have different frequencies. People sound different. Your voice is as unique as a fingerprint. Your voice has a very distinct set of frequencies that it uses. And so if I were to put an equalizer and try to adjust the frequencies of everything in my track, I may end up hurting myself by cutting out a frequency of my voice that made it sound really good. So it is typically best just to go ahead and leave this track and not put too many things on it, just so that we can ensure that we are not creating any big sweeping changes, anything that may hurt a different part of our project that we didn't mean to hurt. So,
I have one more question.
yes.
When you've done this project,
Mm-hmm.
those things that you put into the add-ons, when you start a new project, are those still there? Or do they just
So if you start, I would say if you start a new project, it kind of depends. If you choose one of those templates, it will come with some of those some of these plug-in effects already loaded up and already set to some settings that are ideal. But again, everybody's voice is different. Everybody's, everything, and a lot of different things affect the way our audio sounds. So it can be good just to go ahead, if you do use a template, maybe take the plugins off, or go ahead and just try to adjust them a little bit to what your voice sounds like, to what your friend's voice sounds like, so that they can, so that the plugins can sound the best that they can.
Once I export them,
mhm.
they all stay the same.
Exactly.
So I don't remove them.
Exactly.
I can adjust them, or if how I set it up.
Yeah. So when we export, what is going to happen is that it's going to start playing our track through, kind of like a tape, and it is going to print any of the effects that we have used on the track are going to be permanently added to that file that we'll get. So let's say we put this final one I want to show us here, a reverb effect on here. We have this natural reverb. And basically what reverb is this echo that you're hearing in this room. That is reverb. It's the sound bouncing off of the walls, off of the desks, off of each other, off of the projector, off of everything. And then it's coming back and it's hitting our ears and it's causing a bit of an echo. Now, what a reverb effect does is that it tries to mimic the sound of a room, kind of reflecting different pieces of sound at you, and it tries to replicate that, and it adds a little bit of echo, a little bit of depth to your music or to your podcast. And then I'm so sorry, but I forgot your question. But I would say, I remember now. But yes, if we were to go ahead and set this, as you can see, there's a whole lot of different, I was going to say, yeah, all of these different things kind of affect how long the echo is, how present the echo is. This. So that dubbing is a bit of a different process. Dubbing is, when we would kind of go back and re-record some things over our original audio to play behind that audio. It kind of does have a similar effect to what reverb does. But what dubbing is really good for is adding a lot of volume, adding a lot of character to your audio like that, so that it can, so that particular element that you have overdubbed stands out a little bit more against everything else going on. But yeah, I'll say there's a lot of controls on this. I don't, unfortunately, have times.
One section of that instead of the whole thing, like at the end, you just want to reverb?
So that is actually a really great question. So as I go ahead and that actually brings me into something I was going to talk about. As I go ahead and add a couple of other effects on here, you can see that the natural reverb is staying in that first position. That is because, like we talked about with signal flow, the audio is moving through each of these plugins one at a time. So we do need to kind of be careful which order we put things in. So like if we have what we have now and we have our reverb first, we're gonna get a very large echoey signal that's gonna then move on to the equalizer and then the compressor. So, and exactly, you're kind of making that face that probably wouldn't be a great decision. We probably don't want to create this big echoey sound and then try to tame the big echoey sound. Instead, what we can do is we can grab this reverb plug-in and move it to the end of our signal chain here. And now we are using the equalizer first, the compressor after, and then it's hitting the reverb. So we are going to go ahead and tame our audio's frequencies. We're going to adjust that, make sure it all sounds good. Then we are going to adjust our track's our audio's volume, make sure that everything is level, and that our little guy is making sure that nothing is getting too loud. And then finally, we are making our audio really big and echoey by adding that reverb. Yes, back to that. There are a lot of different controls on here, like the size, the decay, the slope, and all these things. And I'm not going to explain this because I want you guys to learn for yourselves what it does. So again, like I mentioned with the equalizer, go ahead when next time that you guys book out the recording studio, pull up the reverb plugin, look for it on the list there, and then just start moving those knobs around. Go ahead and start adjusting the size of the reverb, make it as big as possible, and see how that sounds. Change the slope of the reverb, see how that affects the audio. Change the density and the diffusion of it, and just see how each different thing affects the audio in a different way. And then that can give you a basis of, okay, I really liked it when the decay was set at 12 o'clock, and I really liked it when the diffusion was set at more like 7:30. So I'm going to turn that there, I'm going to turn that there, and I'm going to turn that there, and then try that. Oh, maybe that didn't sound good. What if I tried this, this, and this? Just play around with these plugins, play around with the way that they sound, the way that they interact with your audio, so that you can get not only a fuller understanding of what these do, but just have fun, It is just really fun to just kind of listen and feel like you are creating something new with just the power of your voice and some wires in a computer program. So yeah, I just really can't encourage you guys enough just to get into the studios and just play around with all these audio effects and see how they sound. So you can go ahead and say, and if you want to get rid of these plugin windows like I am doing now, they all have little X's at the top right corners, and then they have these little power buttons as well. As you can see, that just made the plugin right there gray. That is because I bypassed it. Basically what that does is means that it's no longer affecting our audio. You can see that in the equalizer, all of the waveforms went away, and if I turn it back on, it brings them back because now this plugin is affecting our audio once again. So we can go ahead and get rid of that, and then we can talk about some of these controls down here at the bottom. So as I showed you before, there's this red button right here. This is our main recording button. There's also a shortcut for this. Actually, before I get too far away from plugins, apologies. I'm going to go ahead and change this to this all MIDI ins, and then show you what these virtual instruments can do. So we have this instruments folder right here, and if we drop this down, there isn't a whole lot that waveform itself has to offer, but fortunately for us, I've gone ahead and put a couple of my favorite virtual instruments on here, like this one. This is called the Surrealistic MG1 Plus. And as you can see, it just pulled up a keyboard and a synthesizer for us. That is because this is exactly what this is. It's a digital synthesizer, and we can use all of these different knobs and things like that to affect the way the synthesizer sounds and everything. And it's got this nice big keyboard that whenever I press things with the record enable button on, make sure we're on all MIDI ins here, we can go ahead and we can control this down here, but there's also the option of going down to this little keyboard icon here, and it brings up something that appeared on my screen here, but it brings up this little keyboard looking thing, and if we follow its instructions and hit caps lock, we can see it's highlighting different things, and it's lighting up with our, it's lighting up all of our volume meters there as I tap on my computer keyboard here. That is because we can, this allows us to control this plugin, this virtual instrument with nothing but our keyboard itself. But we always do have the option to play it like a piano on here. It's just kind of a matter of poking and clicking and things like that. The what we call
Program stuff right into that?
sorry.
Does allow you to program?
Yes, you can. I was gonna say, once you get a recording, there will be a little window with all of the different notes that you've played in it. And you can take those notes. If I go ahead and just get a little bit of a test recording here, we can see, just kind of tapping on the keyboard here, I can pull that up and it brings up our MIDI roll. And what we can do, we can see all of the different notes that we played in that, and we can highlight them and drag them around. We can make them longer or shorter. We can delete notes entirely that we want, or if we want to, we can add even more notes down here. So this is another way that we can control those virtual instruments, is by not just playing them, but we can actually program and write out melodies and things like that for our virtual instruments to play there. So I'm going to go ahead and X out of that. What?
That's not for a novice.
I was say that is a little bit more on the technical side, but at the same time, all I'm doing here is I'm just clicking on this track right here, giving it a double click, and the waveform brings up this page automatically. Exactly. Yes. Yep. Exactly. I'll say it's kind of what I've tried to design the studios around, is giving you guys as much of a professional experience, as much professional sounding audio, professional sounding plugins as we can. I was gonna say, and this is really, it seems complicated, but it's really kind of simple here. All I'm doing is I'm just clicking and I'm dragging this to the point that I want it, the time that I want it. I'm dragging it down to the note that I think sounds the best. And to say, I know we can't hear it right now, but usually you'd be able to hear, the synthesizer sounds coming through, and you'd be able to hear, your melody, and all you got to do is just place notes, in a pattern that you think would sound good. So, if I want to do just kind of like a little da, 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 I just place all those notes right there, and I hit play, and I go, okay, that sounded okay. What if I moved this one back a hair to play a little bit? Maybe I don't like this note. I'm gonna raise it up a couple of half steps there, and then I'm gonna listen back to that. Okay, that sounds even better, but I want this to be a little bit shorter so that it goes dun, da, 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 something like that. So that's really how you would use this MIDI writing tool here. I was gonna say, again, it seems complicated, but once you get your hands on it, once you start, messing around with it, you kind of start to learn it, and you start going, oh, this is actually not too bad. I can start to use this in my music or in my podcast. And you don't have to be a musician. Knowing a little music theory may help, but at the same time, I dreaded my music theory class in college, so no judgment on people who maybe don't want to learn music theory. But I do encourage people, if you are going to be, engaging with music in any sort of way, learn a little bit of music theory. Learn what we call the circle of fifths and things like that. Just so you have a kind of like what we're doing now with audio. You just have a little bit of a foundation that you can build off of later. And I am getting a little bit close to my time here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up some of these things. Finally, what we would do is that at the very end of our project, if we are ready to kind of quit, we are ready to take our project out, what we can do is, first of all, we go ahead and hit these 3 lines down here. It brings up some of our editing tools here, specifically these file and this edit. This edit window is exactly what it is in Word or in pretty much any other program. It's just cut, copy, and paste that you can use to highlight your audio. You can go to edit, you can go to copy, and then if you know your key commands, you can hit Control V and it pastes it for you. This is very helpful if you want to do like something that's looped over and over, like a drum beat or maybe a bass line. that is very helpful for doing that. But let's say, we're at the end here. The very first thing we want to do, as we should, is go ahead and hit this Save Edit. And as we can see at the very top, it says Edit Saved, and that way we have certainty that our files aren't going to be lost, and we are going to have everything saved correctly. And if this darn ad window would get out of here, we can go back to this, and we can go back to File, and we can look at this Export Render to a File option. So at the end of our project, if we want to share our beautiful podcast with the world, what we would want to do, and we've gone ahead and we've put a bunch of Reverb plugins, we've put all of our, we've edited everything very specifically to the way that we want it, and we want to save the way it sounds in a singular file. We can go ahead, we can sum all our tracks down to one. We can go ahead and hit that Export Render to a File window. And as you can see, it brings up this export window. And this is how we would transfer our files off of Waveform so that we just have a single file that we can share with people of our entire project. So once again, one of the most important things is to look for this little blue button here and go ahead and press it so that we can make sure that our files are saving in the right spot. This is also a good time for me to go ahead and we can look at this and we can see that we have Gene RS Basics and today's date. This is what we call our project folder. And if we go into this project folder, we can see that there's a couple of different types of folders that everything has been saved to. We have archive, backups, exported, imported, and recorded and rendered. Basically what these are is those very two top ones, archived and backups, are very important because what if your computer program crashes during your recording? What if you're using a lot of plugins all at once and you've got to get that tone right, and then all of a sudden everything quits? Well, that's going to be okay because Waveform will actually go ahead and automatically back up your project for you and create a saved version without you having to hit that save edit feature. And then beyond that, all of the tracks that we have recorded, all of the clips that we have recorded will always appear in this recorded folder as well. So when we export everything, we want to make sure that we go to this exported folder in our project folder on our USB drive to make sure that it is going to the right spot and it is going to save correctly. This, again, will usually be default, but I do encourage people to go ahead and give that blue button a click and go ahead and make sure that they are saving to the right spot. Now, the next thing we have to talk about is what kind of file that we want. Now, there's a lot of different types of file on here, but I'm sure one of them in particular is going to be very familiar. It is going to be this MP3 file. And this is the one that I'm assuming that most people are going to want to get at the end of their time here. MP3s are the most common type of audio file on the market right now. So if you want to share your audio, if you want to share your project with the world, I recommend getting an MP3. But there's also another option of this WAV file, the WAV. And in that instance, I'd say if you want to continue working on your audio and you want to have a very high quality version of your song, you're going to want to select that WAV file so that you have a very high quality track that you can share with people later. But for the sake of argument right now, we're just going to go ahead and say that we're going to export an MP3. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah, that is a really good point as well. Thank you for that. What you're talking about right there is the program that you use called TuneCore that you upload your music to share it. Doesn't accept MP3s. They will only accept that WAV file. I know a couple of other services are like this, specifically Spotify, specifically Audible. If you're recording audiobooks, they will want that WAV file. So you just want to make sure that you go ahead and grab that before. Yes, yes. Say into that here in just a bit. So if we go ahead and do the MP3 file, there's a couple of different things that we want to check on. First being this sample rate. We want to have this at the highest sample rate that we can so that the audio is as clear as possible and it is detailed as possible. And then sample size, we only have this one option, so we're just gonna do 16 bits. And then we have a couple of these boxes already checked. You're definitely gonna wanna leave those checked. Specifically, this remove silence at start and end does pretty much exactly what it describes. If we have a little bit of extra space before our recording, it will eliminate that and go ahead and put it and just cut that out and move our audio to the very beginning. Next is this dithering enabled. Just make sure that's checked. And then moving on, dithering is a very complicated process that I don't even fully understand, but we can move on from that. It is just good. A lot of, like we were talking about before, a lot of those services will require you to dither your audio before you send it. So just make sure that is checked. And then just make sure you do this just level one. That just kind of makes sure that everything is, it doesn't work exactly like the compressor does, where it makes sure everything is level volume-wise, but it will just kind of ease a few things up or down to make sure that there's no very dramatic shifts in volume, so that something doesn't go from being very, very, very quiet to really, really loud unexpectedly. And then finally, this render automatically. This just goes ahead and creates a render while you're setting up the rest of your parameters there. And then finally, one thing that is good to point out is this render each track to a separate file option. So if we do have a situation where we don't, for whatever reason, maybe we are working on we're mixing a song for a friend of ours who's in a band, and they want an individual file of each individual track. We can just go ahead and select that, render each track to a separate file, and it goes ahead and does that for us. So we don't have to be going in and selecting each file and hitting render, select, render, select, render. Yes. Yes, I was to say, and that is a good point. If you want to bring what you have recorded into a more professional setting, there's a very good recording studio that I've kind of met the owner of up in North Normal. Yes, Eclipse Studios. He is very cool, isn't he? Yeah. I'll say it's a very nice studio. Let's say you wanted to go to Eclipse Studios and you wanted to, you had a bunch of different things recorded already. The owner of Eclipse Studios would probably say, hey, I'd like to have these files, but they need to all be individuals. So you would just go ahead and hit that button and it would do that for you. All right, so once we have this here, we can go ahead and look at the WAV file real quick, because everything is the same as you can see, but there is one key difference of this sample size. Now, a lot of places are particular about the sample size of their the audio that you are sending them if you're sending them a WAV file. So the safest option I have found in pretty much every context is just to go ahead and select this 24-bit. Because sometimes 16-bit is just not enough. Sometimes 32 is a bit too much. 24 is that nice Goldilocks zone of just right. So that is that. We go ahead and change it. And then once you've set your parameters, once you have adjusted everything to what you need, you can go ahead and hit render. And it says export complete. And the window goes away. We can pull up our file explorer down here. And we can check out, and then it pulled up once again on my page here, sorry. And we can go ahead and check out our project folder in our USB drive. So we've got waveform projects right here, and then we've got my project right here. And as we can see in our exported folder, it has the renders that we did, both the MP3 and the WAV exports. So that is a very handy feature. But like I talked about before, you want to make sure that you grab that entire project folder when you are in the studio so you can ensure that nothing is going to get lost, nothing is going to get misplaced on the computer's hard drive and then force you to hunt it down later because you've pulled up your waveform session again and it has hit you with an emergency notification. Oh, you're missing files, you're missing things from this session. You don't have to go through and be searching the name of your project and all of the different things that you have recorded there. So that kind of brings us to the end of our waveform portion here. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our PowerPoint one more time, and we can go ahead and finish up with just some of these general audio tips that I have for you. So like I mentioned before, you really want to watch those volume meters in the waveform program so that we don't clip our audio. And our highest peak of the volume meter should probably be hitting about halfway up that meter. To eliminate pops and unwanted sounds from our recordings, despite the fact that the PodMic does have the windscreen and the pop filter built into the design, it can still pick up a few of those things sometimes. So I found that the best way to do it is to go ahead and get about 3 inches. I pretend I'm a surfer, and then I bring my thumb up to my hand like that, and then that's about how far I like to put my microphone whenever I'm recording. And then as you can see, exactly, yeah, and you want to be talking loud right there into the middle. And as you can see, yes, I was going to say, it is possible to talk into one microphone with 2 people at the same time, but you may not get the best sounding audio out of that. And then beyond that, to kind of reduce the pops that you may hear, it is good to do what I'm doing right now where I have the microphone turned just a little bit. That way those P sounds aren't going directly into the microphone's capsule, and it is kind of evening out the sound that way. And then finally, when you are mixing with some of those plug-in effects, like a lot of things in life, less is always more. It is much better to make little, small changes to things than it can be to make large, sweeping ones. But even though I say that, there really are no set rules for these things in the studios. If you crank a reverb plugin all the way up to 11 and you love the way that sounds and you just can't get enough of it, leave it in. It's all up to you and the way that you think everything sounds. These are just kind of, again, general audio tips that if you want to do, maybe a bit more, a professional sounding mix or something like that, making those smaller changes can sometimes be a little bit more beneficial than the larger sweeping ones. But
one more question about
yes.
with COVID and people sneezing.
Yes.
Like an alcohol thing. I mean, like,
So
there's something permissible for us to do to work from
So I'm the one that takes care of that. I do wipe down these microphones and the headphones usually at the end of each day, just because, I had COVID at one point and it was awful, and I do not wish that on anybody. I do not wish anybody to get the flu or any sort of disease when they come to our studio. So I do make sure that I take some disinfectant wipes, very lightly wipe down some of the equipment and things like that, wipe down the keyboards, and things like that. So yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you. But with that, it brings us to the end of our time here. Does anybody else have any other questions regarding the recording studios, regarding audio as a whole, or regarding our specific studios or studios as a whole? Yes.
I was just gonna ask, if we happen to get stuck somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
are we able to go to like the front desk or somewhere and ask someone for help?
Wonderful question. Yes, you are absolutely allowed to do that. Typically, I will be the one that will come out and give you a hand with that. I am usually here in the afternoons and evenings on Wednesdays through Thursdays, and or no, not Wednesdays. Sorry, Tuesdays through Thursdays. And then I am here all day on Saturday, and then on Friday I am here from open till about 2 p.m. So if you have any questions during those times, I'm more than happy to answer them. However, that will be the most immediate response you'll get. But in the recording studios, there's a little sign with a QR code on it as well. That QR code is linked up to a Microsoft form that is linked to my email. So if you have any issues while you're in the recording studio, you can just scan that QR code with your smartphone, or if you need to, there's a link that you can type into the computer, into a browser on the computer, and it will take you to that form as well. You can fill out that form with your information, the date of your reservation, and then what you are having an issue with. And then I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible with an answer and a solution to your question.
You have a manual in there too.
Yes, great.
Because this is intellectual property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes people just leave it.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the 24-hour day,
Yes.
clean up everything that you forgot.
Yes, and that is why it's so important to have that flash drive with you and make sure that you're getting your files off of the computer when you leave, because I do go in there and I do clear off other people's files before other people come into the studio or at the end of the day. So kind of like a lot of our other computers, you know, we really don't encourage people to leave anything personal on the hard drives there. Much like that, it is best to go ahead and grab your files at the end of the day and then go ahead and delete them so that you don't lose anything, but more so importantly, that it doesn't get deleted when I go through and clear everything out. Yeah. Yes.
One more question.
Great.
So, how it's set up where you can go in and just click on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Since a lot of us are beginners, if you just decide to start recording as is,
Mm-hmm.
will it make it harder if you do try and go back in and tweak it if you don't add any plugins or anything like that?
No, not necessarily. If you just go in and get like a recording, just no plugins or no anything like that, and you export it, there was something that I didn't quite have time to get to right now, but there is also an import feature on Waveform as well. So if you get your audio and you like the way it sounds and you take it off and you export it, but then you're like, maybe I'd like to go back and adjust that one more time. You do, if you have your personal drive with you, you can go ahead and just plug that back in, pull up that previous edit file that you are working on and go ahead and add more things to it. Or if you don't have your drive on you, but you do have that file, you can import it into a new project and you can go ahead and adjust it that way as well. Yeah, any other questions before we wrap up?
It's great that
Mhm.
you can go, some places won't allow you to put your email or put your flash drive. 'Cause
Yeah.
you're checking it. But that place, you can import.
Yes.
Bring whatever you have on a flash drive and just imports. It's not going to block and say, well, we got to clean this out because
Yeah.
it's already been protected because you're watching it.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Exactly.
viruses, so you can
Exactly. Yes. I would say we're not getting it from any sort of sketchy website that anybody's, is just coming off of our computer. So we have utmost certainty that we can go ahead and import that audio without anything bad happening. Yeah. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yes. So it's not a finished podcast, but I'm a big fan of horror podcasts and things like that. So I have some fiction horror stories that I've written that I'm going through and recording. So yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah. Any other questions? I'm getting some head shaking. Some nods. Well, yes. No problem at all. Yes, that is something I'd like to mention real quick before we wrap up, is that here soon enough, we are going to have on the Recording Studios page of BPL's website, there's going to be a link where you can request an audio lesson with me. And basically what that'll be is about an hour of just us sitting in the studio working on a project that you want to bring in, or even if you don't have a project, just us doing some recording together. And I'll just take you through kind of like what we did here, but on a much more one-to-one level, where I can kind of go into a bit more detail about certain ins and outs of the program, and give you a couple more of those general audio tips that I've got. So yeah, thanks for messages. Yes, unfortunately. Unfortunately, yes. I'm still trying to get him on the phone to get do new contract, but well, thank you guys so much. You have been a wonderful crowd, and I've had a really good time getting to explain to you my passion here. I hope that you guys have learned something. If you have any other questions, I will be around for a little bit longer, and I can answer them for you. But with that, you are all free to go. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.